Welcome everyone to the Extraordinary Coaches podcast. Today I'm here again with Nik. This week we already recorded an episode, but we didn't record it. So actually we just talked for about 1.5 hours. It was a beautiful conversation. I was very happy with the conversation. And then here we are. We were invited to do it again. I'm going to ask you the same question as I did last time. Could you please introduce yourself to me again?
Yeah, sure thing. Nice to connect again, Mick, and I look forward to our conversation. So my name is Nik. I'm a guide. I primarily work with creators, entrepreneurs, artists, and I guide them to clarity within them so that their gifts can unfold and so they can make a living doing what they love. I've had a pretty rich and versatile career myself. I studied finance. I worked in financial technology. I quit that and became a full-time artist, and eventually found my way to coaching and psychotherapy. And now I weave all of that together into my practice.
Nice. What immediately stood out for me is that you use the term guide instead of coaching, and we've talked about it in the previous conversation as well. But do you want to go into that a little bit? What's in your opinion the difference between guiding and coaching?
Yeah, sure. So traditionally, coaching has emerged from performance coaching. So it's much more results-oriented, action-oriented, and of course, it has evolved since. Not all coaching is actually coaching in that traditional sense. So coaching has become quite a broad spectrum of service or space holding. But primarily it's focused on that. So it's a very practical lens. It's using frameworks, it's using tools, it's using systems, accountability. Whereas guidance is a lot more open-ended. It's a lot more explorative. And for me, for instance, I focus a lot more on the inner alignments, on the fulfillment, kind of going deep within rather than the external achievements. Now, of course, external achievements might be a byproduct of the work. Same with productivity or, performance, but that's not really the focus. The focus first is to get the alignment right, and then everything comes out of that.
I like that. I truly believe that. And apparently then I've been doing guidance a lot too, but I truly believe that is in a way the way. Not always. Sometimes people need to achieve outer things only to realize that that's not really what's going to make them happy. So for some people, that's the fastest way. But for other people, it is indeed coming from that inner fulfillment. And only from there, everything in your external reality starts to align with that. I feel like that's quite powerful. However, then what I used to have trouble with as a coach, doing it that way, the guidance way, the way where you focus on the inside instead of the outside more. Usually when trying to, I don't really like the term sell yourself, but usually when you want to onboard clients or create clients for yourself, it can be very difficult because people are like, yeah, well, fuck the internal stuff. I just want to have that car, or I just want to have the new job. How do you do that? How do you create clients in that way?
Yeah, it's a beautiful question, and I've certainly come across that before, and some people voiced that, and I kind of pondered about that myself. I mean, I choose to work with people that have gotten to a certain level or a certain level of awareness, consciousness, where they realize, perhaps they've already been in a 9-to-5 job, or perhaps they've already chased the money or the goals, perhaps they've already achieved them, but they began to see through the emptiness of it, or kind of understanding, okay, I'm actually not in the place that's really fulfilling me. I'm not feeling, that this is giving me something on a deeper level. And so I tend to work more with those people. I mean, if it's more, and there are different stages, there are different ages. Like, people come to this at different stages in their lives. It's not like it's a linear path. So that tends to be the way for me.
Yeah, no, but that's nice. So you sort of adapted your audience on the way that you like to work, instead of trying to push the way that you like to work onto people that don't even want to be involved in that.
Yeah, exactly. And you're 100% right in the sense that sometimes we need to do the things that we don't actually want to do, or that are not actually aligned for us, in order to understand that that's not where it's at. And that's fine. Like I don't think it's necessarily like being born straight away and sort of finding your alignment when you're 5 and then kind of living from there. Like life is also about making mistakes or trying different things and exploring, and it involves some kind of trial and error. But for me, it tends to be like people that have already done some exploration, or they've tried, or at least they've achieved something, or some kind of a success, as we would call in the societal terms, but the feeling is not right, like something is missing. And sometimes, on the surface, it might be about work, but it's actually, more about the perspective, or maybe it's more about the relationships, maybe it's more about health. So it can still go into other areas of life. But, the general feel is like something feels out or off, something is out of alignment. And we start from there and we explore.
And then people find you just through X, right? Or did you have any other platforms? You said you were in the process of releasing your website.
Yeah. So my creator guidance, or guidance specifically for creators, has been through X, and that's an offer I launched relatively recently. So the clients I'm working with right now through X have been through X, but I've also worked with people through my personal networks. I've worked in a number of companies, startups, also artist circles. So a lot of it has been through my network or word of mouth. And I mentioned to you, I also have an Instagram page. I do my photography there. But it's only now that I'm really starting to go onto social media and offer that through online realm, basically, which is a whole journey of its own.
Most people do it the other way around. Most people start online and then start to reach out to people in their online environment. What made you do it in the other way? Is it just how it went, or any specific reason?
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful question, because so for me, up until now, guidance has been more of a kind of side focus, or I would still focus more on my artistic pursuits or on the entrepreneurial pursuits. I was a co-founder in a startup that eventually failed, but guidance was always there also in those services. I was guiding people in the companies. I was guiding people I was working with, or sometimes shooting, for a photo shoot. And then it was only recently that I decided to really make it my main focus. And so therefore I decided, well, why not really build something out online so that I can increase the exposure and have all these extra channels and it's also a beautiful way for me to share what I've learned. I'm really like, content creation is something that I actually really love doing. That process of coming up with posts or creating videos, sharing my philosophy or sharing stories. I mean, I could do it for free for ages, which I guess in a way I'm doing, right? Like I'm reaping benefits like from finding clients, but ultimately I'm doing it because I enjoy it.
Nice. I feel like it's a very powerful sign. I recorded something with someone yesterday, and it came up there as well, where I feel like it's a very powerful question if you ask yourself whether you would still do it for free, or would you still do it if no one would show up, or yeah, I feel like that's when, if the answer to that question is yes, then you know that you have real internal motivation, and then it's not per se externally motivated. Now, of course, there's always, or not always, but usually there's a balance between it. Like, and I would do it. Yes, I would do it alone, not forever. Like, I would like that little external validation as well. And I feel like it's indeed, especially as coaches in this online world, kind of a trying to balance that. Like, how far can you go until you in a way give up or try something new or whatever, which is interesting. What is in your coaching journey, if you still remember, like that shift that took place, or the biggest thing that changed in order for you to easily onboard clients?
I guess probably the biggest shift was when I felt the confidence in myself to charge for it. It's like, okay, this is so valuable, and actually people are ready to pay for it, and so why not make that happen? Because it's always come through naturally for me in my working relationships, in my personal relationships, just helping people on a deeper level, listening, being present, asking questions, guiding, sharing my experience, but then to kind of bring it in a more structured format in sessions or in longer containers, realize like, oh yeah, I could actually make a living with this. And it started very simply. I was, the first paid session I had was 4 years ago, and it was with a friend who was making or like creating a startup, and he was still in his 9 to 5, and he was struggling with a lot of fear, with a lot of insecurity, and so I offered, and I was like, hey, I'm kind of developing I'm learning a lot of coaching right now. I'd be happy to give you a session, pay whatever you want. Like, it was just a symbolic fee. And he, as a good friend, he paid me 10 euros or 10 pounds. So, but it might not seem like a big amount, but it was something like, okay, wow, there's something in this, like people value this.
Right.
And of course it only went from there. So
I love that. I also like that it really resonates with me, because it's also sort of a client determining whether you get paid or not. In a way, my story is that I used to coach this woman for a very long time, and eventually she came to the point where she was like, "You should charge me for this." I was like, "No, it's fine." And she was like, "No, but really, you should charge me for this." And she kept saying it, and I was like, "No, but I just like doing it. It's okay." And then one day she was like, "I feel like I owe you something. I'm not going to continue if you are not going to charge for this." And I was like, "Interesting. All right, I'll just charge you for it." And I just picked a random amount, and she was okay with it. And it was so funny, because I sort of was forced by a client to start paying for this, and then it got like real serious, because I was like, wow, I can just make money with this. I suddenly started to make as much money as I made when I worked in the supermarket from just this single woman who I helped. It was crazy for me. Again, it wasn't huge amounts, but it is indeed that little confidence boost that we sometimes need in order for us indeed to shift and start asking other people the same or even more. I don't remember what it was. I think it was 40 euros an hour, which is crazy, right? I feel like it's insane. What is I like this question because I got asked it recently. What is something that sets you apart from other coaches or guides?
I mean, the quickest answer is it's my own uniqueness. It's the combination of everything that I've been through, and there are different archetypes that are dominant in myself. I have a business background, so I have this analytical and financial mindset. I have a background in art, so I bring in the creative, the artistic. I've been interested in spirituality and philosophy ever since I was a kid, and I've learned with different spiritual teachers. I've done dozens of retreats and various practices, so I bring in that element too. And then of course, like all the combination of all the coaching, all the therapy, all the techniques that I've learned. But I feel for me, I feel that for me, the biggest gift that I have is my presence, simply being present, and, to hold that space for anything that needs to emerge. I don't judge, or if a part of me judges, I become aware of it pretty quickly and I can put it aside. And I do think that that's probably the biggest gift that anyone can have also, as long as they get to that. But the problem is, I think a lot of coaches or therapists or guides, they get stuck on a more surface level of like asking the best questions or the best techniques, or kind of thinking they have the answer for the client. Whereas actually it's just about being here, being present, being open, and seeing what emerges in the space.
Yeah, definitely. How do you respond when a client asks you a question that you ask them back?
When I ask them a question and they ask that question back to me?
Well, then they answer it, and then they're like, "How about you?" Do you answer it in those situations?
It depends. It depends on the client. It depends on where we are in the session or in the container, because I have kind of two different sides of the session generally, of the way that I work. One part of it is just to create as much space for the client to explore. So I wouldn't say I'm like an empty mirror, but I just, if they ask me like, well, what do you think? I would ask them something like, what do you hope that I would say, or what do you wish that I would say?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of return it to that, or to see like what kind of answer they're looking for. But I won't stop there. Some people stop there and then that's it. At the end of the session, I also offer like, hey, if you want, I can share my perspective on what I've observed. And generally, I still kind of keep to what I've actually seen in the session, rather than making too many assumptions or leads. Yeah. But I'll share my personal experience if I feel it's relevant. So I will still bring myself into it also.
Nice. I like that. I'm not sure how I got there. I remember a client of mine asked this recently to me. She was like, "Is it okay if I ask you like these questions back? Because I very much feel like I'm sort of being observed right now." And I was like, "That's a pretty good point in a way. If I feel like I can make someone more comfortable in that way, then of course." She had a background in therapy, and therapists are more often the ones who would literally put a wall up and then just fire the questions and observe the other person, and then they let them leave and they come back next week, which is interesting. Do I remember it correctly that you have a psychoanalytical background as well, or did I just make that up?
No, not psychoanalytical. I mean, the closest I've done was Jungian analytical psychology, but it's a bit different from Freudian psychoanalysis. In terms of psychotherapy, primarily I've studied humanistic and somatic approaches.
How do you feel like they've benefited to your coaching?
I mean, tremendously. I feel that the line is actually really blurry between coaching and therapy. Of course, it's a lot about the intention, or kind of, but I use a lot interchangeably. I feel like a lot of what I've learned in coaching can be applied in therapy, and vice versa. I mean, still my intention, or kind of what I do, is more towards guiding, towards coaching. But there's often healing that happens. There's often really deep work, and we go to deep places, and I hold space for that too. And specifically in psychotherapy, I mean, there are various approaches of psychotherapy, right? But there's the more, as you mentioned, like psychoanalysis, analytical. It's more like the theory, okay, this like ego development, or your parents said this, therefore that. Yeah. I might inform myself on them, but I try to move away from them as much as possible, because I often feel that theorizing or intellectualizing can take us away from the experience. And instead, I've always been more drawn to psychotherapeutic modalities that are focused on what's actually happening in the moment, in the experience between the client and the therapist. And that's Gestalt, for instance. Hakomi is a beautiful modality I've learned. That's working a lot with the body, focusing, noticing. And existential therapy, to an extent. I mean, it can get a little bit mental sometimes, but it's also like the big part of it is phenomenology. So what's your raw experience? What are your sensations? What are you noticing? So yeah, those kinds of techniques, they've really supported me in the way that I can hold space. And I think it's beautiful when coaches can get some training in psychotherapy and vice versa, because I think they really complement each other beautifully.
Yeah. I like what you said right there, where you said that they help you hold space. It's not that they do the work for you, these techniques. It's not that you can just count on the technique and you step aside. It's very much you adding it onto you, sort of, so you have it not per se to fall back on, but indeed to add on to you and add on to the way that you hold space and are there for someone. I think that that's very valuable and underrated advice, because some people are looking for tools and looking for PDFs with questions that they can then get next to their computer and just ask the clients the questions, which is not the way to go about it. Instead, I feel like I think these types of PDFs can be very valuable, but in a way where you just skim through them, and like if there's a question that stands out to you, you'll remember it anyway. You don't need to. So when the time is right, it's somewhere either stored in your body or wherever memory is stored, but you'll feel it come up in a certain way, and then you just made it part of you instead of part of your toolbox that you have when you coach. I think that's powerful.
I'd love to ask you, Nik, what are some of your favorite questions, or which questions often come up for you in sessions when you're holding space?
That really depends on the session. I'm a very big fan of the question, what else? I really like it. It really sometimes gets someone out of their standard head answer into an answer like, oh, I got to think about it now. Then you know, like, okay, that's going to come from within, actually, instead of the prepared thing, you know. I also like those questions where you can, in a way, straight away pull someone out of their, I don't want to say bullshit because it's always very valuable, but a question where it's like, so what are you really saying? What do you want me to hear right now? These things that people are like, oh yeah, right, I've been murmuring some stuff right now, but there's what is my actual point? And then to be conscious of where they are and that they're in the session. I feel like those are those moments that really get that, not per se insight moment, but it's very much a conscious moment for someone being like, right, I'm just saying stuff for the sake of saying it sometimes. Why? You know, those things. And the question I just asked, why? Very powerful question. Love it. Love it to just throw it in there sometimes, just to get a little extra depth. Though I feel like you got to be careful because it's a very easy question. I feel like many beginning coaches, or at least to my experience, the why was really my magical question. I felt like when you just sit with someone and you let them talk and you go, why, you'll get them to a certain insight, you know. But I feel like coaching sessions aren't always about going pretty deep and having someone figure out the why behind the why behind the why.
That's so interesting because, yeah, because for me, why is actually one of my least favorite questions.
Really?
Also to receive in a way. Yeah, and I'll get to that. I mean, I think there.
I just wanted to say why.
Yeah. No, there are definitely times when I think it's useful, and you know, especially like you know, in this case, that's a beautiful example, right? That's just to uncover like, you know, the reasoning behind it. But I guess when we're going really deep, the problem or like the risk with why is sometimes, so one side is, you know, that's something I learned in my coaching training. Why can feel a little bit confrontational or sort of, or almost judgmental. You know, it's like, so it's better to phrase it as like what or how. It's like, instead of why, is like what makes you say that, or like what moved you to do that, or how is it to be with it. So you kind of go from a different angle. But more than that, for me personally, I feel that why sometimes there's a risk of rationalizing or intellectualizing. People will just, you know, share the story of why they think something is, but it won't actually get you to the truth. Now, it might get you a perspective of what their story or narrative is, but ultimately, I feel we have to go deeper. I don't know if you've come across those split brain experiments when they split the two hemispheres of the brain in neuroscience, neuroscience studies, and then, you know, one part of the brain is responsible for talking and the other is responsible for moving. And when they tell them like, get up and, you know, go and close that curtain, and then you ask them, okay, well, why did you go and close that curtain? They'll say, oh, I just felt like it. Because the other part, the part that's, you know, that's talking, it didn't hear, right? Like, you know, that's a different part. So it kind of, like the ego can immediately story. So the story, we sometimes, there's value in that too, I think, like just to get the perspective of like, okay, how does the client see their world? But I think maybe that's more the beginning, and then we have to dive more deeply. So
I recognize what you said, because I was always also taught that in my studies, where the why question can be very confrontational. You kind of want to ask it in the, what would be the reason for that? But I feel like for me, it's always been a natural question to ask. Therefore, it doesn't seem as if I'm asking it in a confident. It's not like, why would you, but more in a, why is that? And I feel like that there's a massive difference between that. And I feel fake if I would wrap my why question into another phrasing. I really feel like I sound like a therapist when I'm going to be like, okay, and what do you think the reason behind that? I don't even do that. So it's much easier for me to just spit out, okay, why? In a way where, yeah, it is allowed to. Sometimes I allow it to be a bit confrontational too, because it sort of stops someone in their tracks, being like, right, why? And whether, because I remember that experiment too, and I completely, it doesn't matter whether I agree with it or not, but it resonates with me. So then that makes me wonder why. I still think that is such a powerful question, because maybe everyone who's given me answer to that question gave a bullshit answer, but still I feel like it did create space for there to be a certain deeper layer behind a belief that they or behind an action that they never really thought about. I think the why question, it doesn't really matter on the answer, but more on standing still with what it is that you're doing. It is maybe a bit confrontational indeed. It sort of stops you and makes you think about the reason behind something. And I think that's interesting. How about you? What's your favorite question?
Well, one question that I love to ask at the beginning of the session is, what would you like to walk away with at the end of our time together? Yeah. And specifically, how would you like to feel by the end of the session? Because I feel that just sets the intention, that sets the North Star, and then whatever we do, we kind of almost automatically get there. The questions that come through me, or the way that I am, the way that the client, where they go, it's kind of a direction in a way.
Yeah.
And throughout the session, I mean, for me, again, I try to bring the person as much as possible to the present moment. And so a lot of questions might be like, if they share a story, for instance, I just ask them, how do you feel now that you've shared that with me? Or how is it to share that? What are you noticing as you've shared the story? And so there's noticing, there's bringing back, and often I also involve the body, like, what are you noticing in your body? Like, what are the sensations? Like, without labeling, without judging, or without telling a story, like, oh yeah, I feel like tension in my left shoulder because I was in the gym, and generally my left shoulder is like this and that. No, it's just like, what are you aware of right now? And that helps to slow things down. It's not that we don't want to go into the stories or rationalize or use intellect. That's a helpful tool. But I feel like, as we talked about it already in the Western society, we overuse the rationality, we overuse the analysis. It's all about knowledge, it's all about information. And whereas that's helpful, and I love that too, that's a tool, but I almost want to bring the balance of like, okay, let's bring in the feeling, the noticing, the present moment, the body, the experience.
I like that.
In its pure form.
That makes me realize how we, in a way, have the same profession. But I mean, I knew this already, but in a way we have the same profession, but we use it both in completely different ways. I feel like the indeed feeling state and the present moment state with you and your clients is a way higher percentage than it is for me. I think I utilize it because I recognize the power, but I think about 15 to 10% of the sessions is about that. And indeed, I am more about intellect and insight, and from there letting that sink in, and only then going into the body, instead of using the body to get a certain insight, which I think is very powerful too. In a way, it doesn't really matter. And another thing I wanted to add is, let's say you're listening to this, anyone, and you recognize a question like this that you're like, oh, that's interesting, I kind of want to use that, I would invite you to try and make it your own, because there's indeed, like I said, you can ask why in 20,000 different ways, and the question that you just asked, what would you like to take from the session, or I'm paraphrasing already probably, I would suggest that if you take a question from this and want to utilize that, in a way make it your own, because then it's more personal and it doesn't feel like you're asking a question for the sake of answering the question, but you're asking the question because of actual genuine curiosity. And I feel like then you create space for the other person. What else? What are other favorite questions that you have?
I mean, what else is a good one, but I won't go into it, as you mentioned. It's really great. It's really a powerful question. Yeah, for me, I mean, one question that and this is more on the intellectual level, but and I use it sparingly. I don't use it very often, but I notice, like, especially if the person is really struggling or they're really having difficulties in their life, but they're having a hard time kind of accepting the difficulty or kind of seeing the wisdom in the struggle or what they're learning. So I like to ask something like, if you intentionally design this experience to learn something, but then you erase the memory of designing it, what do you think would have been the lessons that you wanted to teach yourself?
Can you ask that one again? Because you were a little bit lagging in the beginning, so I didn't catch the full sentence.
Yeah, sure, no worries. So if you intentionally design this experience in your life, like these struggles, these difficulties, sometimes, and then you erase your memory of designing it, so so that you can just be in this experience, what do you think would have been the lessons that you wanted to teach yourself through this experience?
Cool. That's a really nice question. It's like, why?
Yeah, also, yeah. But
yeah,
but just from
I like it.
It takes them onto like, okay, and it's just like they're able to just move slightly on a level above what's happening and look for wisdom. Like, what are the lessons in this? I can also ask, like, what are you learning from this? Or what do you think you will learn from this? That's also a way. But I think that adding a bit of context almost allows this kind of realization. So
yeah, it's like a hero type of feeling, or you feel like you're an actual hero when you're answering the question, even though you're with struggles. You immediately put someone simply by them answering the question, you're putting them in already that feeling like, oh, nice, like I learned something from this, which is powerful. I want to shortly touch upon something that I know you're very passionate about, which is the enneagram. How did that come on your path, and how do you use it in your coaching?
yeah, sure. So for those listening, and if you're not familiar with the Enneagram is a personality framework or a system that has different personality types. Another famous one is the Myers-Briggs. There's also the Big Five, and then there's many other frameworks out there, including the more esoteric ones like astrology, human design, gene keys, and so on and so forth. So Enneagram, the way it appeared for me was, I mean, I've been obsessed with systems of the human psyche since I was a teenager, and I don't take them as 100% truth. I don't use them actually that much even in what I do, but I feel like throughout my life I'm just doing research of like, okay, are any of these systems valid? Like, actually, is there truth in it? And Enneagram, I think the first time that it really, I saw it a few times, but the first time it really caught my attention or sparked interest was a couple of years ago, or maybe even more, like 3 years ago, when I was listening to a Tim Ferriss podcast with, it was Toby Lutke, his name. He's the founder of Shopify, originally from Germany, but living in the US. And Toby brought up Enneagram and how they were using it in Shopify in the company. And then they started talking about it, and then Toby tried to guess Tim's type, and Tim was familiar with Enneagram, so he shared his, and then the other way around. They were really close, but they didn't guess it exactly. And and I was like, okay, that's really interesting. Like, you know, I just want to dive more deeply into it. And
Yeah.
and then I did a few personality tests, and you know, and then I started reading, and then I just went on down rabbit holes over time of just studying, reading, understanding. And some of it also came from my own, like, a less healthy place of like, I want to have a framework for reality, or like I want a framework to
Right.
understand myself. You know, it's
Yeah.
almost like the illusion of truth or information gives me a sense of control, right? Like, okay, I can like explain, I can like,
I
you
can
know,
put myself in a
whereas,
box. Yeah.
what's that?
I can put myself in a box so I can understand it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, but it also came from a more healthy curiosity of like, okay, like what can I find out about this system, or about the world through it, or about myself through it? Kind of use it as a mirror, as a system to reflect. And it's been a beautiful journey. And then since then, I've become pretty, I don't want to say proficient in it, but I've done a lot of study to the extent that I can kind of comfortably talk about all the types, all the different dynamics. But it gets like there are layers and layers, and it gets deeper and deeper. And
Yeah.
the types are only on the surface. You can move between the types. There are different levels of health. It's very vast as a framework, and I think that's why it's actually more accurate in a sense than some of the other frameworks like Myers-Briggs out there. And yeah, and then I met some practitioners that also know well, and they kind of told me what they thought my type was. So it was helpful to kind of compare notes or observations, because it's always quite difficult to type yourself.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, it's been a beautiful journey.
Do you use it with your clients?
Um, Only if they bring it up themselves, or I've noticed bringing it up themselves, or they show interest in it. I don't actually. There hasn't really been a case where I might have mentioned it, just like, oh, there's a framework out there, but I haven't actually implemented like, hey, like let's do a personality test, or I'm going to type you. And so more, it's like if they're open to it, if they're interested, I might share. Like recently, I had a session with a client, and he thought he was a particular type 4, which is my type, and that's probably the type I know the best. And listening to him and kind of noticing, I was like, like, it might be like we only had one session, and I've kind of observed your content, so this is just intuitive. But I think you might actually be type 9, and then the second guess was type 5. And then he was like, oh yeah, I could see myself in that. And he reflected a bit. And then he came back with a message to me, and he said, yeah, like all the feedback resonated, but what really stood out for me was the type 9. When I read the description, I burst into tears, because I could see so much of myself in it. And it was both kind of a relief and both pain or like a struggle of, this kind of seeing this truth reflected.
Right. Yeah.
And so again, like, I don't say they're 100% valid, right? It's just a mirror, like many other systems. It's just a map, and the map is not the territory, as one of my teachers used to say. So,
Right.
but it can be useful.
I feel like I've only relied on a system like that once. It wasn't the enneagram. I forgot what the name was, because it's been a long time ago. But it was the first time where, and I don't know the English term for this, but it's like you coach someone alongside their job, in a way where you help them realize what job would fit them better, or like they're sort of struggling with the job that they have. They don't really know what they want to do, so you help them alongside that job move into a different direction, or help them fit in the job that they have. And I remember that I got him as a client, but he wouldn't pay for it. His boss would pay for it. And for me, the investment, so I felt pressure. Like I was like, I gotta like live up to results, not just to him, but also to the boss, because that person is probably going to ask, like, how is it going? And then he has to be like, oh yeah, well, or he can actually put something on table being like, oh yeah, we did this, and then she would be satisfied. So I remember that I decided to lean upon one of those personality tests, where in like a week, I taught myself the whole system and stuff like that. And then I bought the test for him, and then I made him do it. And then a few sessions, we were just analyzing him throughout the thing. And the funny thing was that it resonated with him in a way. It helped him figure out a little bit what he wanted to do. And I talked to him about 8 months later, and I remember what came out of the personality test that he shouldn't do, which was start up for himself, work for himself, because he was more of a team player, stuff like that, and some other things that would not resonate with him. And I remember talking to him 8 months later, and he was doing exactly that. He was doing the exact opposite of what came out of the personality test. I was like, that's so interesting. Like, I kind of felt guilty because I pushed the personality test on him instead of actually listening to him. But it was such a, yeah, I don't know. I thought it was so funny. What do you think on that? How flexible or fluid are these tests?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the way I would describe it is I wouldn't take it's a fine line, but like I wouldn't take anything that I read about the test or the type or the personality for granted. And it's like kind of checking in, does that resonate? Like less prescriptive and more kind of an invitation to reflect. And same with astrology or any other map.
Yeah.
So I think it's dangerous to kind of to then say, oh, okay, like you're this, so this is the way you're going to be, or this is the way you are.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's more framing as like there's a possibility you might be this way, like see if that resonates with you. But it's hard because, and I think that's where it's helpful to be with someone else that also has a good bullshit meter, because I think we like to have an idea of ourselves or how we want to be, and generally even and that happened to me. Like at first when I typed, the first time I ever did the enneagram test, I got the type that I turned out to be, but I read the first type and I was like, I'm not sure that's really me. And then I read the second type, I'm not sure. And then I went for the third one. I read it, I'm like, oh yeah, that's me. But over time I realized, well, that's maybe who I thought I was or who I wanted to be.
Yeah.
But it's actually the type that's kind of harder to accept. That's often the type that you actually are, because it's so like in the face, and you kind of reject it, or there's a blind spot in your consciousness that's like, oh, I don't want to be that. So
that's so valuable, actually. That's such a yeah, it's in a way just a mirror, but you need to look into the right mirror, because it's very tempting to look into the mirror that tells you already what you know, which is probably not the right mirror.
yeah,
that's pretty cool.
well, I mean,
I like that.
The mirror is still not the reality, right? And then I'm sure we can go into rabbit holes of this whole of this whole sentence. But yeah, it's a constant reflection or contemplation, or just kind of not taking anything as like, I don't take anything in my life as 100% truth, nor that I deny anything as 100% false. I just accept the openness and the possibility of anything.
Yeah. I recall being a little bit into the Enneagram a few years ago, but I don't recall what type I am or how I type myself. If purely out of intuition or in the chats that we've had, how would you type me right now?
Yeah, I mean,
if you can, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but
no, sure. Like, I mean, I had a guess from the beginning, and I'm kind of, as I get to know you a bit more, I'm less sure about it. But I wondered if you might be type 3, which is the achiever or the motivator. And I don't know, I think it was something in particular about the part of you that I perceive that wants to appear a certain way to others, right? Like when we're talking about sessions, and that's very much a trait of this type. But again, it's like that's only one data point, right? And then as I get to know you more, I also see like but you're also very like self-reflective, and you've done a lot of work on yourself, and so I'm like, could be, might not be. You could be a type 4 also, which is my type. That's the individualist or romantic code, or the artist sometimes. So it's somebody who's very self-aware, reflective, but can also be reserved or kind of be with melancholy. But I don't know enough about your emotional world or your feeling world also to make a decision on that.
Fun. I'm going to read about type 3 now. Hit you back up.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you wanna add before I ask my last questions?
What's the most important or the most burning question on your mind right now or lately? Like, what's the most essential? Yeah, for yourself.
That's funny that you ask. That's really funny that you ask. Because the question I've been pondering upon this week has been, what is my why? Which is funny because it's like the why question, but then for my existence in a way. Yesterday I wrote it all out. I just grabbed a new booklet and I just started writing about what I'd like my why to be, or what my reason for being here on this earth at this moment is. And I remember that I hadn't asked myself that question in a very long time. At the beginning of the year, it used to be very much to inspire others to do more of what they liked. That used to be my why, or to show others that they can have what it is that they really want. Let it be freedom, let it be anything else. I really wanted to embody that and show people that. And then I stopped asking myself the question. And then when I asked myself it again, and I answered the classic answer I had in the beginning of the year, I wasn't satisfied with it. I was like, and then what? What's next? Or like, why that even? And I was like, fuck, I don't know the answer right now. I don't know what it is. I don't know what my why is. And I sort of let that go a bit. And then this week I was like, I feel like diving into the question a bit more and creating an answer that is for me, not why I'm here for others, but why am I here for myself? Why would I even be here? Which is an interesting question to journal upon, because it brought back some interesting answers, where I think partially the reason why I do what I do is to be valued, to be recognized, to be seen in a way. And that was so interesting when I wrote it down. I kind of felt ashamed for that, because it might be the wrong reason, it might be the wrong why. But then again, I was like, but it is in a way. I feel like I want to be acknowledged. And that was such an interesting. It's part of it. It's not the only reason why I decided to be a coach, but I realized that part of this work that I do and part of the things that I do is because a part of me just wants to be acknowledged, wants to be seen. And that was interesting. So it brings that up, and more. But yeah, that's the question that I've been playing with this week.
May I ask what might you be looking to find or get from the answer to that question?
Purpose. A reason to get up in the morning. Sounds very depressing, but a conscious reason to get up in the morning, a conscious purpose, a conscious goal maybe, or something to work on.
And how would you feel having that purpose and knowing that purpose?
I think it would take some relief came to mind. I would feel relieved, because I would feel like I could stop looking, and just start doing, stop thinking, stop over analyzing things, and just doing things, because I know that what I'm doing comes from the heart. So yeah, it's partially relief, and then I guess another part of I would be able to get myself into a state where I would feel more goal oriented, where I would feel more masculine in a way, because I have something to strive for. I have something again to set my alarm 4 and 5 a.m. in the morning. I like that me sometimes, the me that really has that driven purpose, that it just sets its alarm before anyone else and starts getting the goals done that he has. And I feel like I lost touch with that part of myself a bit, where I just let days go the way they went, and it had its time. And now that it's turning into fall and autumn and people start to reflect and stuff like that, I feel like I start to switch into action mode and I want to do stuff. So that.
Yeah. So if we were in a guidance sessions, for example, that's where the way I would take this, for instance, would be I would help you connect with that feeling of relief. And that might be closing down the eyes, connecting with a memory that, made you feel a sense of relief, and really feeling that in the body, allowing that. And only after inviting that state in, then actually going into this conversation, because I really feel that's my personal perspective. And, I don't believe we think our way through to the purpose. I believe we feel our way through to the purpose. And because purpose is something that's not intellectual, it's like it drives us. There's a feeling in it, it's like it matters to us on some like kind of deeper level. And yeah, and I guess on the purpose side, I feel, people are often saying like, find your purpose, or I'm looking for my purpose, or I'm trying to find it. But I really feel that we create our purpose, in a way that you kind of almost decide, like you're the author of your life. But I think the feelings can be intuitions or indications for you to help you create what is it that you want to pursue or live for, or
I agree. I agree.
Thank you for sharing, by the way. I really
thanks for asking. It's funny how I've really noticed myself each episode that I do getting more comfortable with being vulnerable, because I would always think that saying things like this can hurt my reputation as a coach, in a way where, but he doesn't even have his shit straight. He's asking himself still these beginning questions, when in fact I feel like, or I've learned to feel more in the way of, indeed, I don't have my shit straight always. Sometimes it feels like I do. Sometimes I feel like I don't. Doesn't mean that I can't do my work. Or sometimes it does, and then I don't do my work. But, we all have those moments. And I feel like I'm literally just human. And I used to always protect myself from going deep, because, what if people then see me as the coach who doesn't even do the work himself? I was always afraid of that. So that's fun. So thanks for helping me again take another step into vulnerability. I think that's powerful.
Yeah, I really believe our deepest strength lies in our vulnerability. And I think you're exactly doing the work and embodying that by showing the human side, and that there are questions. And, and I really believe that, as like, if anyone watching or listening to this, if you find someone that seems like they have all the answers, run, because nobody does. And that might give you a temporary relief, but the reality is nobody knows anything. We know nothing. We might get an idea, we might choose what we believe in, but ultimately we're just experiencing this reality. And even if you look at science, like, yesterday we have one study that proves something, and then the next day we have another study that disproves it and proves something else. So, if you find someone who can be open, and as Krishnamurti, one of the spiritual teachers, would say, the highest form of intelligence is observing without evaluating. And if you find someone who's able to do that, I believe that's someone that's worth working with, because that allows for the rich exploration, rather than kind of finding quick solutions and then understanding, well, actually, no, that was just another concept or another idea, but we need to go deeper than that.
Yeah, I like that. I've asked you this question before, I think, as well, but to be honest, I can't recall the answer, which also made me get back to this question. And I think that's powerful, because your answer might be completely different than the last time you answered it. What is an extraordinary coach to you?
Yeah, I feel an extraordinary coach for me is someone who courageously lives their own life and courageously dives into their own inner world. And to me, it's, because I feel so much of it, I really believe I know the world through myself. The deeper I understand myself, the more I understand myself, the more experience I have myself, the more I can relate, the more I can understand others. So it all starts with me. And often like I'm my own guinea pig, in many ways. And I experiment and I learn things. And I think as a coach, and we touched on that last time, you can only go as deep with a client as deep as you have gone yourself, within yourself.
Yeah.
So if your capacity is really large and you've seen some really, dark, shadowy corners of your own psyche, chances are you'll be able to create that space for others, and you'll be able to bring awareness to those parts of us that maybe we reject or find ugly or find unacceptable, and bring awareness, bring love, and to integrate that all into your healthy personality, into your healthy psyche. So yeah, and for me personally, I mean, one of my favorite books is Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. And one of the reasons I love that book is because it's a journey, and he tries himself in so many different lifestyles and ways, and, learning from different people. And I think, if I meet a coach who's only, I mean, I don't know, I mean, he can be really good at doing things, but I really value those people that can also bring their personal experience into it. Like they've had their own suffering, or if they've done their own inner work, or if they've tried themselves in different things, and then they share what they've learned. I've found that really valuable. So to me, that makes an extraordinary coach.
Is it if I could summarize that then in 2 words, and please add to that whatever you want to add to that. I would say you just said lived experience almost.
Mm-hmm.
Would that summarize it correctly, or do you feel like you would want to add something to that?
Yeah, I mean, if I had to summarize it, I would call something like courageously lived human experience. They've put
Nice.
themselves in situations that they were afraid of, or that took them out of their comfort zone, but they've also like they've dove deeply into their own psyche to understand and to know themselves.
I'm writing it down because I think it's powerful what you just said. Do you feel like you are? Are you an extraordinary coach?
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. I feel that there are things that I'm still afraid to do, and things that I still haven't tried. There's still places in my psyche that I haven't gone into, but I really do feel that I have the intention to, and that I live by it. And at the same time, and I mentioned to you last time also, I also accept my ordinary side. Like, I don't feel like I always need to be extraordinary or to be special or to prove something. There's a lot of extraordinary in the ordinary, and there's a lot of ordinary in the extraordinary. So I guess I'm just a guide, and beyond that, I just am.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks for adding all of that, and thanks for being here again and doing this. We record thing. Thanks. I'll put all your details in the description below if anyone wants to hit you up, chat with you. And I want to thank you for being here and going this deep with me. I appreciate everything that we touched upon. I really liked it.
Yeah, thank you, Mick. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I really appreciate that you reached out, and it has been a blast, and I look forward to chatting more with you.
Love it. Awesome. And thank you everyone for watching. See you next time.